All right, so step A9 with the front part of the drive shaft. That's what I'll call it for today. I've already assembled one half. Now this part only deals with half of the drive shaft. In fact, the half that's going to be installed on the transmission that we just finished. So with this one already installed, because I wanted to have a good idea of what I was talking about before I started, and we can build the other one. This is a normal spline setup. It's hollow, so you know, if you torque the motors too much, expect that you'll be replacing these down the road. I'm assuming that just from what I've seen before. So depending on what you're doing, you might want to be careful. But we will build this one because it's stock. It's light, it should be easy to use, and for anybody just driving around the grass, out on the street, through a puddle, something like that, this will be a decent setup. So there are multiple screws, but because I've put one together, I only have the set that's left. I've got a little spring collar here. I've got a metal collar that will have a set screw not put into it. I'll get to that in a minute. And here is a drive pin. So the first thing I'm doing is taking the screw right here. This is a 2mm screw. And I'm going to be pushing it straight through the drive shaft, just like that. And taking this little cross section, see the ball joint here, this is where everything's going to hook together, the pins and everything. But this has a cross on the bottom, which also fits into slots on the inside of that drive shaft. So I'm just going to gently move it until it fits into place. That screw isn't into place, it's just in the hole there. Actually, I'll just remove that just so I can wiggle this in and show you guys. It's a little bit stiff, but that's good. I don't want it falling apart. And in it goes. Now, I could probably use a drill on this part, but I choose not to. I don't mind feeling how tight the screws are when I'm assembling a kit. Really, it could save me time, but it could cost me time down the road. Okay, so no thread lock went into there. It doesn't call for thread lock, and I don't really see a purpose for it either. But there is the drive shaft. What is that little burr you must be thinking up there? It's not a burr. I've actually gone ahead and already squeezed some black grease into there, because I know this little collar is going to be going through that hole. And this collar has a hole, as you can see right there. I'm going to be sliding it through the hole that I just greased. That's going to prevent any kind of additional wear or friction building up in that area. And then I'm going to take this neat little collar looking thing, show you right there. I'm doing this for people that have never seen a drive shaft assembly before. And this ring on the top has this little collar area. That's what this spring collar is for, which will hold the drive pin. So let me demonstrate what I mean. So, you know, one of the things I noticed about this drive shaft assembly, if I can focus in there, is on the inside it seems threaded, but I don't see anywhere in the instruction book where it says that I have to thread a grub screw in there. And in fact, it doesn't seem to come with one. You know, so that's really neither here nor there, because this collar right here is going to prevent that drive pin from coming out. So I'm going to line up the holes in the collar with the hole that we already lined up in the slot. And it's going to go like that. And I know you guys can't see, but it's clear all the way through for me. I'll take this little drive pin, make sure everything's lined up, and it should slide in there fairly smooth and easy. You can see it just went right in. Line it up on the other side, and it's in place. So that's what your drive pin should look like when you're done. Flush. Yeah, you can't see it poking out at all. Then you take this little collar. It's like a small spring. You can see I'm moving it with my hand. And I'm going to start stretching it around. I've got to get it over the collar lip. And it's kind of tough to do it on camera. I was kind of fearing this part, but just to explain it, I take my fingernail and I stretch one of the rings around the collar, or the collar lip. And then I just kind of thread it on with my fingernail. I'm sure there's better ways to do this, but this is what I do. I don't mind. Dun, dun, dun. It's easier when you're not on camera. Okay, there we go. I popped it into place. So you can see why that set screw is really not needed on the inside. That collar and spring collar really kind of fix that problem. So there's the two pieces right there. If I flip out, and that's the from steps 1 to 4 right here. I showed them to you in order. Now, the set screws that are here, I do like this feature. This is something that I like. And yeah, it is available in other trucks, but these guys include 2 set screws, one for either side of the drive shaft. And on their transmission, on their output drives, you can see flat spots. I'd turn it, but the motor's set up. These flat spots actually spin on either side. So there's 2, one on either side. So I can set it up like this. I'll be able to turn the drive shaft in a minute. I'm just going to start threading it. Pardon my arm. And then it asks for a bit of blue thread lock. Now, if this is the first build video you're seeing, I discussed in the other ones getting to this point that you don't want to use too much thread lock. The more thread lock it is, the harder it is to get the little set screw or the grub screw out later if you need to adjust anything. And experienced hobbyists know that if you strip that out, it can be a son of a gun and you'll have to drill it or do something silly. So, can I turn it now? Not quite. Hold on. I'm just going to undo this. I'm pretty sure it's not over tight. Where is it? Got my screwdriver on the wrong side of the table. Remember how easy this was to remove? This shroud over the spur gear assembly. It's just one screw and a little tab on the back. So I'll just kind of move the drive shaft around so I can access the other set screw on the other side. This is all done in real time so you guys can see how long it does take, which actually really isn't long at all. A little bit of thread lock, get in there. And tighten it down just a little. Wipe any excess thread lock off, and I'm good to go on the other side. So same kind of idea. Can move a little faster now that you guys know what I'm doing. There we are. Oh, just a little bit more than that. Sparse, but not too sparse. Bah! And in place, quarter turn. Turn everything around. Access that secondary hole. Now with 2 grub screws, the reason I like this, of course, is that it's not going to back off very easy when you're driving. One of the things I've noticed over the years is if you only have 1 set screw, if it does strip out or start to move, you can lose your drive shaft, and that kind of sucks. So those are in place, and that's basically the completed transmission with the motor. Now, this is only half the drive shaft on either side. I'm going to leave this shroud off in case I need to turn this a little bit later. Let's see, secondary drive shaft. So we're moving into the B section, which means B bag. B bag, and I've already got the bag I needed. So I'll move this on this side, kind of bust it open, see what we got. So here's the other half of the drive shaft, one of the axle housings for the differential. Looks like I got a steering spindle, a C-hub, and I'm probably assuming this is for the link kit, but I don't need these right now. I'll need this one in step B2 over here, like that. But I also need a few other things. So it looks like I will need a bearing. I will need the drive shaft assembly. So let's see where those are. Bag B. Kind of bust out what's in bag B. I can easily identify things just from having a look at them here. There. So I can see drive shaft assembly, differential, and everything I needed. So there we are. So a new kit like this, any kind of build that I've ever done, I'm basically learning along with you guys. And I like to do that. I like to set expectations of, you know, what can you expect when you're opening the bag and how long is it going to take you. And sometimes it's always good to have a build buddy like RC Adventures here working along with you so you know, if you're stuck on a part. I've kind of already figured it out. It's kind of like a walkthrough. Here we are. These are shims for the whole differential. So I'll get to that. There's the shims right there. I'll move these off to the side, but I did open the bag. Here is some bearings. Fantastic. But I'll look at this bearing first. This one, like I said in the other build videos, there's a bearing. I'm lining it up to the picture of what's being supplied, because then you know exactly what you need. And here's one of these little screws, and that also fits. It says it's a 10 millimeter. Perfect. So let's get these other pieces out of the way so they're not confusing for folks. And I don't think I need this bearing right now. But I do need the drive pin. This one, and this one I also need. Wow, interesting. So it's a different kind of setup. I like that. Don't need the gear. So what am I looking at? The big tube. It doesn't really say which numbers everything has to be, like doing it in which order. So I'm just going to kind of hit it right now. So this bearing will end up going on here eventually with the drive pin being installed. That's no problem. Going to line it up. Here's where the collar goes. I'm just lining this up just like it is in the picture, right? This is exactly how I'd think you guys would want to do it as well. The little drive pin goes in down there, and this end little screw I don't need. I need that in a different part. So, so first part, we'll line up that little cross section again, move that in, get the screw that we need, which is a 2mm, slide that into place. Don't need any Loctite right now. And that's tight, hand tight. I tighten it up and then I do a quarter turn. That's it. I don't want to overstress anything. Same with the collar. Need a little bit of grease. I see it's not asking for grease here, but I'm going to grease it only because the other ones suggested it, so it would only make sense. But not a whole lot of moving going on in there, but still we'll need it for the friction. Just lining it up right. There's the grease. Grease on the other side. Then I'm going to be taking this piece with the drive pin. Drive pin goes on the inside. There you can see the pins set up. Everything's done. But I don't see a collar system for this yet. But that doesn't mean too much anything. I need to see how it's going to be assembled. Duh, here's the collar assembly. I already talked about it. So this slides on. Now the pin is not able to slide out at all. So there we are. So looking at the finished drive shaft, we're going to move on to B2. B2 is showing me the differential housing. So I'm going to line it up, make sure that the shape still matches the direction, right? Because I don't want to have it backwards. This is what they're showing. This goes into the front part of the housing, like so. Now the drive shaft is attached right inside the bearing. Crazy. All right. This side. Now I see the other bearing comes into place. Now I see the pinion gear comes into place. And now I also see that first little screw that I moved out of the way is ready to go. Now let me get that screwdriver out. Looks like I'm going to need a little bit of thread lock. This is facing that direction. The bearing's going to go in right now, so you can see that there's a hole for the, there you go. You can see the hole is for the bearing. Just going to squeeze that around the shaft that we already put in. Come on. Nice. Once that's in place, which it's not yet. Here, let me push this right through. There. Done. So I almost have it seated properly. I'm just going to go ahead and take, there, seated properly, flush against the bottom, flush on the outside here as well. So now that I have a good seal there, I'm looking at the direction of the pinion, which it's the smaller part is going away from the axle housing. Here is the screw that I need. And here is a little bit of Loctite that it's asking for. Not too much, but enough that it's going to work. I'm fitting that in there. I also notice on the bottom, the pinion is a square, so it's going to have to line up. So instead of putting that through like that, which could have been done, but to make it easier to see, I've just pre-fit it right against the bearing. And in goes the finishing screw. Done. Beauty. I love that setup. I'm very interested to see how that's going to do. B3 front spool and cover assembly. All right, so here is the front spool. I'm imagining this is what they're calling it right now. It's a large differential gear. It's beautiful, actually. I love seeing brand new things. It's so neat. They're asking for a bit of black grease on this. Now, are they intending the teeth? I don't know, but I'm going to assume a little bit on the teeth, only because that's been my experience throughout the years. Plus, I also imagine on the outside of this, we're gonna, well, I won't add any grease, actually. That's where the bearings are gonna go, but I'm not gonna add the grease yet. Here is B21 bag that I see has 2 bearings. It looks like those are the size I will need. Oh yeah, it is. Plus I also see the plastic part on the inside is something I need. So a little tiny nut, 4 little tiny nuts, and a big nut putting them all together. Okay, so 4 little screws. Looks like 2 of them are the same size and 2 of them are a little bit different. So no problem. Always good to identify, and again, just kind of double check what your screw sizes are. You want to make sure to assemble it the first time properly. So, bearing on the outside, 1, and then this one, 2. I also see it has a square post. I imagine those will be for the axles. Making sure I'm still directionally proper. I want to drop this in to the seating position, just like that, against the pinion. So notice when I turn this, the drive shaft moves. There you go. So that kind of shows you how the pinion and the diff gear works together. We also have a cover. So where's the cover? It's in the first bag where I found the steering parts. Dun, dun, dun. Ooh, shiny and nice. And it looks like it kind of clips into place, or is that just a shroud? You can see that the area is built in for the bearings to be seated. So I'm going to place this on right now, directionally proper. Ta-da! And which screws go where? So the little ones go on top. That makes sense. And it doesn't need this plastic piece. This looks like it's going to go on the bottom. So little ones on top. See if I can get those in there properly. These are 1.5 mil screws. And yes, like I said, I could use a drill, but here we go. It threaded through pretty darn easily. And those 2, all I should have done was just kind of give it a little nudge there once I started threading it. See if I can do that again. And one of the things I'm going to pre-do is put these little tiny nuts in their seated position as well, because it looks like they're pre-sunk. That's cool. Once you get them started and you get the screw in place, it kind of will pull that nut towards itself and seat itself. See that? Maybe, maybe not. You would have had to have been paying close attention to this area. So I'll do it on this side since we got the screw basically in place, but I'll back it off a little so you can see what's going on there. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. Put this tiny little nut right in the top seated position. Now make sure you're lining it up properly. You don't want to not seat it correctly, because if you start to tighten it down and you don't do it properly, it will crack and break the plastic housing. I don't know with this model, but that's been my experience in the past. Okay, so right there, I'm going to start getting the thread into the nut and watch. See if I can get it nice and close for you to see. Focusing up. Right here, please. Thank you. And kind of sucks it down. There we are. Okay, same thing on the bottom. Kind of tedious, but when you're using hand tools to turn these things in, you're able to feel the amount of torque that you're applying, especially in these little tiny plastic areas. Can you imagine you're doing a build, you didn't take the time to actually line it up properly, and then you cracked your axle housing before you even got to run it? That's like a nightmare. Let's see if I got this right. There we go. This is how they break up this space. Beauty. Piece of cake. Not too tight. I don't want to crack anything. As long as it's covered, I'm happy and in place. I don't think it will shake loose. Perfect. Done. So not too tight, just tight, and a little tiny quarter turn there. So, hey, looking pretty nifty. Pretty sharp. Everything's turning smoothly so far. Had a little bit of grease on the teeth. Perfect. Okay. So this little collar, little dog bone, has collars. One goes on either side. Notice that it's opposite. That is ready to go. The one that has the hat pushing to this side is going to be the one facing out. This goes directly in there with a tiny, well, not the tiny one. This is the longer screw that's coming out here. This is a 26 millimeter screw. We're going to be using this right on the bottom. Now this piece that I gently put on, that I placed on these collars down here on the axle housing. See this? This is the piece that I thought was for the linking for the suspension. I believe it is. Here, let me just kind of clean up this end a little bit. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Goes just like that. This part jutting out. It's very directional when it's calling in B4 here. Might as well put these little guys in first, because then I'll be mounting it straight to the axle housing. This is going to be a 2.5 mil screw, and no thread lock is required. I can see why. The way it threads in, I don't feel like this is going to be coming out anytime soon. Now, does it sit right in there? I think it does. Yep. Okay, so you can screw this in right until it's flush. You can see. Perfect. We'll do this one. This is quite a neat little setup. I've never seen anything designed quite like this before. You know, it's got familiar setups like 3-link, and of course everything has to have an axle housing, but the way the drive shaft goes in around the, and having the bearing holding in the drive pin, the drive shaft, the drive pin, the bearing, and of course the way this mounts right to it, pretty neat. Alright, so moving on, finally getting in this longer screw. And this is going to have a small nut seated. Nope, it's not pre-sunk. It's just going to be threaded right through there. I can feel it starting to grab and turn. I should use some needle nose, but I got these handy. Of course, I'm being lazy. I've got needle nose pliers like about 2 feet away from me. Okay, so there we go. That part is done for the link mount assembly. Moving on. Okay, I'm looking for a bag full of axles. This one, bag B3. Let's slice into it. Move the transmission back here. And like so. What am I looking at? Okay, more places where I'm going to be putting collars. These are the axles. Here's the output drives, or the CV setup here. This is a front CV assembly. So 2 collars, drive pins, the collar stays basically for the pins, or the pin collar, and I imagine grease. Yep. So I'm going to just pre-grease these holes. Again, just to prevent any kind of friction or unnecessary wear. This looks very simple to do, actually. So just like before, we'll go ahead. We've greased up the hole. I'm going to slide that pin right through. Now that that pin is through, I'm going to pick up the little hat. I'm going to put the hat on top of the man. Then the man is smoking a cigar. There we go. Cigar is done. On goes the little collar. I'm going to take it with my fingernail. Stretch. Come on, get on there. Stretch it around. Hey, little guy. There. And just kind of thread it with my finger onto the collar so that drive pin has nowhere to go. And almost completed. Just got this side done. There's one completed axle. No problem, just like before, and then repeat. Okay, so B6 was on my list of things to do next, but I actually jumped ahead and did it for you so you could see the completed assembly. Now, I wanted to see everything, medic. Sometimes I can't do that. And the reason why is because I want to kind of completely understand how things are working as well, because there are subtle differences in the way B6 and B7 are built. Now, I'll show you what I mean. For example, this C-hub has this little horn on this for B7. This doesn't, okay? So that's important to really kind of identify right away because you don't want to be building the wrong side by accident. With that C-hub in place, check this out. I love this design. This is something new. These right here, focusing please, these little nubs are steering stops to stop your servo from burning out on overturning. Look, here's a steering stop right there. If we can get in on that, please. There we are, and there's one on the other side. So when it's actually turning, it's not going to overthrow the steering. Brilliant. I love it. I haven't used it yet, but I'm excited to see how this works out. So, right here, I'm going to pay attention in B7. Right here is the bearing that slides over the axle shaft. There is a collar at the end of the axle shaft that stops that bearing from going any further. This is not really a pre-drilled seated position. This bearing is going to go on the inside of the collar. What do I mean by that? Okay, so I'm making sure directionally that this is right. The horn is steering away from me. These steering stops are on top. This little bearing right here actually has to fit in there, but there's no stops from stopping it going back further. So I'm going to slide this through without getting that bearing unseated. So I'm going to actually have to use a flat screwdriver here to hold it in place, push the bearing through right up to that collar stay. You can see right where that stops. Now, still directionally, and I'm making sure everything is followed directionally. Here comes the bearing. That fits on in place like so. Then comes this little aluminum collar. Now that that collar is in place, we need to switch over to the steering spindle itself. Spindle's going to be that direction. And we're going to take the bearing. This one is pre-seated. There is a stop point so you can push it in. On the inside, that's where the bearing is going to go as well with this little collar. But before you do that, you have to put in the little hat collars. They're actually there to help prevent the binding of when we screw it into place to the C-hub. Come on. Get that in the right spot, and it should go in fairly easy. There, it does. Same with this one. So one on either side. Now, do not lose these. You totally need these. If you drop one on the floor, make sure to take the effort to go and look for it. Going to slide the output drive from the axle straight through, making sure all the pieces are still assembled and these hat collars are in place. Now I'm going to take a 2mm screw. Is it 2mm? I believe so. Let's have a look here. This is 1.5. This is my 2.5, and here's 2. Yep. And it feels kind of like you're not threading it, but if you get in there and don't use a screw or a drill on this, you can get in and tighten it up. Perfect. I like that. Now this one from the top, like so. See, that bearing's already come out on the inside there, so I'll have to reseat that again. And that's only because they didn't put a little tiny collar around that hole, which is surprising, but I'm not the engineer. I have no idea how it was supposed to be. Probably just like that. And you can see it's not bad at all. Turns, I could loosen it off a little bit. See how I left this one a little bit loose? If I keep going, what's going to happen is we'll get a little bit of a bind in there. I've noticed, but that's not a big deal. Just put a little bit of lube in there. It should be fine. Cutting off any excess plastics. And here that bearing slid out again. Always during assembly process, hey? We'll be able to see during running videos, and it's because I basically pushed this whole axle back, right? That's going to push the bearings out. We'll see during the running videos when everything's screwed into place. I don't think there's going to be any issue there at all. So there's that one. Done. all done. Well, except for this little piece. Here, I'll show you. This is the hex adapter for your wheel. One side is a bigger hole than the other. And that goes in line. Make sure that you have your threaded screw right here. It's not calling for Loctite, so I'm not going to use any. Just using my 2mm driver, drive that in place, not tightening it up too hard at all. Okay, B8, spindle and carrier installation. Here we go. So here is the drive shaft assembly, the axle housing as well. And it's going to go like this, as demonstrated in the picture. Now come these little screws right there. Get this out of the way for you. When I'm looking at this, it shows the one that has the horn right here going on the outside. You can also tell because there is a little R right here. So this will be the right side. Sliding it into place, looking for these holes to line up. This outside hole on the C-hub for the axle housing hole. So I'll probably need to wiggle this into its final mounting position. Want to make sure that I'm not misaligning anything. So the other thing here, I'm going to have to turn my drive shaft, pardon me, my axle, to make sure it can even line up there. And when it's lined up with the inside gear and you turn it, that drive shaft on the bottom should turn. As you can see, that's happening. Okay, so I know it's there. Line it up with the holes. And 1.5, I'm assuming. Nope, still a 2. Bonus. Just going to put that into place. Beautiful. Same on this side. Let's see. Want to make sure I got this right. So right there, because of the steering, feels like the axle needs to be turned a little. And I'm feeling with my hand, kind of like a safe cracker, kind of listening for that turn. Let's see. No, can't feel it. Is it going? There, I got it. That's why. Perfect. Here's the other side. Feels like a nice sturdy axle housing, that's for sure. None of my screws to this point have stripped out yet. Of course, I have been hand torquing them, and I know I keep stressing that in this video, but it gets more important as you go, because when you're dealing with plastics, you don't want to be taking the thread out of them. But they do tighten up nicely. It doesn't feel like they've been pulling, and maybe they'll have some longevity to it if you're taking it on and off all the time. And we get it. Yeah, there we go. Just a little bit of force to get it started threading. There we are. So next I'll have to be doing the whole steering setup, but there is a look at your first, axle, front axle for my Vaterra Ascender. I hope you guys enjoyed today's build video. It's a long one, I know, but just getting through these processes, learning, and of course explaining it to you guys would probably be a little faster now that you've got a guide. So I'll do my best. We'll start the next video as soon as I can. And if you want to follow along, make sure you're subscribed. See you guys next time.